session on lean startup and minimum viable product, which is one of the quarter four activities of Institutions Innovation Council 4.0. I would like to express my sincere gratitude to Dr. Lal for giving me an opportunity to express my views on this fantastic and emerging topic of these days. So welcome to this webinar on lean startup and minimum viable product. Next slide, please. Next slide. So if you look at the agile system, I am going to talk about lean startup methodology, how to make use of lean approach for our enterprises, for our entrepreneurial ecosystem, corporate. Next, please. Next slide, please. So what is a startup? Next. So startup is usually a small company founded by budding entrepreneurs, young entrepreneurs who are having some innovative idea which they want to transform into business opportunities or into startups. Next. What is a startup? A human institution designed to create something new under conditions of extreme uncertainty is the statement by Eric Reed, who actually introduced them. Next. The term startup refers to a company in the first stages of operations. Startups are founded by one or more entrepreneurs who want to develop some innovative product, want to offer some service for which they believe there is a demand in the market. These companies generally start with high costs and limited revenue generation, which is why they look for capital from a variety of sources such as venture capitalists, successful entrepreneurs, angel investors, or Mudra Bank loan or other financial grants available from the government of India. Next. A startup is a company that's in the initial stages of business. Founders normally finance their startups and may attempt to attract outside investment before they get off the ground. Funding sources include family and friends, sometimes VCs, crowdfunding, and loans. Startups must also consider where they will do business and their legal structure. Startups come with high level of risk as failure rate is very possible, but they can also be very unique places to work with great benefits, a focus on innovation and great opportunities to learn. Next. Startups are companies or ventures, small ventures that are focused on a single product or service that the founders want to bring to the market. These companies typically don't have a fully developed business model and more crucially lack adequate capital to move on to the next phase of business. Most of these companies are initially funded by their founders. Many startups turn to others for more funding, including family, friends, and VCs. Silicon Valley in USA is known for its strong VC community and has become a popular destination for most of the unicorn startups, but is also widely considered the most demanding arena. Next. Startups get seed capital to research and to develop their business plans. Market research helps determine the demand for a product or service, while a comprehensive business plan outlines the company's mission statement, vision, and goals, as well as management and marketing strategies. Next. Special considerations. There are a number of different factors that entrepreneurs must think of as they try to get their startups off the ground and begin operations. I listed some of those most important, can make or break any business. And it's often one of the most important considerations for anyone starting up in the business world. Startups must decide whether their business is conducted online mode, in an office or home office, or in a store. The location depends on the product or service being offered. Suppose it is a technology-based startup, you are going to sell some virtual reality hardware. In that case, may have you may need some physical space where your customer will be coming, will be having face-to-face demonstration of the product. You can tell about the benefits of your product. But if you are offering some online service, in that case you need not to have any physical location. You can operate from a single room with the help of single laptop. Next slide, please. Startups need to consider what legal structure best fits their entity. A sole proprietorship is suited for a founder who is also the key employee of a business. Partnerships are a viable legal structure for businesses that consist of several people who have joint ownership, and they are also fairly straightforward to establish. Personal liability can be reduced by registering your company as LLC, which is limited liability company. Next. Next slide, please. Okay, startups often raise funds by turning to family and friends or by using VCs. This is a group of professional investors that specialize in funding startups. Crowdfunding has become a viable way for many people to get access to the cash they need to move forward in the business process. The entrepreneur sets up a crowdfunding page online, allowing people who believe in the company to donate money. Next. Startups may use credit to commence their operations. A perfect credit history may allow the startup to use a line of credit as funding. This option carries the most risk, particularly if the startup is unsuccessful. Other companies choose small business loans to help fuel growth. Banks typically have several options available for small businesses. A microloan is a short-term, low-interest product tailored for startups. A detailed business plan is often required in order to qualify for this. Next. There are a variety of advantages to working for a startup. More responsibility and opportunities to learn are too. As startups have fewer employees than large established companies, employees tend to wear many hats, working in a variety of roles, which leads to more responsibility as well as opportunities to learn. Startups tend to be more relaxed in nature, making the workplace more of a communal experience with flexible hours, increased employee interaction, and flexibility. Startups tend to also have better workplace benefits, such as nurseries for children, free food, and shorter work weeks. The work at startups can also be more rewarding sometimes, as innovation is welcomed always. Managers allow talented employees to run with ideas with little supervision. One of the primary disadvantages of startup is increased risk, primarily applies to the success and longevity of a startup. New businesses need to prove themselves before they can start turning a profit. Keeping investors happy with the startup process is very critical. The risk of shutting down long hours are characteristic of startup, as everyone is working toward the same goal. To see the startup succeed, this can be high. Sometimes also always high, as there tend to be a handful of startups working on the same kind of idea. Next. Next, please. Next slide. Dr. Lal, next slide, please.
Please.
So what are the pros? More opportunities to learn, increased responsibility, Flexibility, workplace benefits, innovation is always encouraged, flexible hours. So what are cons? Next. Next slide. Risk of failure is always there. Having to raise capital, very high stress, competitive business environment are different cons. Next. Next slide. So few examples of startups. Dot-coms were a common startup in 1990s. VC was extremely easy to obtain during this time due to a frenzy among investors to speculate on the emergence of these new business ventures. Unfortunately, most of these internet startups eventually went bust due to major flaws in their business plans, such as lacking a path to sustainable revenue. However, a handful of companies survived when the dot-com bubble burst. Amazon and eBay are just two examples. Many startups fail within the first few years. That's why this initial period is very important. Entrepreneurs need to find money, create a business model and business plan, hire key personnel, work out intricate details such as equity stake for partners and investors, and plan for the long run. Many of the today's most successful companies, Microsoft, Apple, Meta, formerly Facebook, to name a few, began as startups and ended up becoming publicly traded companies. Next. First step in starting a startup is having a great idea. From there, market research is the next step to determine the feasibility of the idea. What is the current marketplace for your idea? After the market research, you have to create an innovative business plan which outlines your company's structure, goals, objectives, missions. One of the most important is to obtain funding. This can come from savings, friends, family members, investors, or a loan. Once you have raised the fund, make sure you have done all the correct legal and paperwork. This means registering your business and obtaining any required government licenses or permits. After this, you have to establish a business location. From there, create an advertising plan to attract customers, establish a proper customer base, and adapt as your business grows. Next. Starting a company can be a difficult venture, but a rewarding one in the long of the journey. Having a great idea and attempting to bring it to market comes with a host of challenges, such as attracting capital, employees, marketing, legal work, and managing finances. Keeping in mind, though, that startup leads to increased job satisfaction and the possibility of leaving a legacy. Next. Next slide. Next slide, please. Mr. Lal, I can't next slide. So startup is about innovative ideas, planning, teamwork, investment, trends, resources, strategy, and product development. Next. Next slide. Next slide, please. Dr. Lal, please go to next slide. Startup ecosystem. It is about entrepreneurial culture, experienced mentors, regulatory environment, collaborative culture, visible successes, risk tolerance, availability of capital, and of course, technical skills. Next. There are different types of startups around us: scalable startups, large company startups, small business startups, social startups, when you are going to address the problem of the society, lifestyle-based startups, and viable startups. Next. Next slide. So how incubators help these startups? By providing a list of angel investors, mentoring support, technical assistance, IPR filing and management, marketing expertise, accounting services, social networking, shared operational costs in expensive workplace, seed funding. Next. So you can also approach your nearby incubator if you want some mentoring and co-working space, seed funding support. Next. So startup is equal to experiment. Next. What is lean startup? An approach that advocates creating small products that test the creator's assumptions, hypothesis, and using customer feedback to evolve the product, thereby reducing waste. This is the concept of lean approach. Next. Method to systematically address uncertainty through rapid iteration and market learning. Next. Lean startup is a process for validating and invalidating your assumptions as quickly as possible to discover and deliver what people actually want. So I hope you must have learned the lean approach is about to have customers feedback. Based on that, you have to iterate on your product or service until you get the right product or commercialization. It is about validation learning. So it has with reduced time, reduced waste. It has to do something with the cost cutting, which is a myth. Slide, please. So lean startup starts with a vision always. Please press. Once you press, then so you have to understand the people around you. You have to work on their needs and pains, and based on that, you have to develop your product or the service. So you have to be very, very much visionary. Next. You should have innovative business model. Next. Appropriate business model development is very, very necessary for a successful venture. Next. So if it is customer development process, where you have to start with your customer discovery. Once you have discovered your customer, you have to do customer validation, whether customer is ready to accept your product or not. Once no, then you have to iterate on it. You have to do pivoting. You have to go back through the loop to the first stage. Otherwise, if it is okay, you have to create your customer and you have to build your company. Next. Next, please. So you have to turn your hypothesis into facts. Next. You have to do pivoting, change of strategy based on validate learning. A special kind of fundamental business model. Pivot requires, if you don't know what you are doing, better do it fast. Next. Next, please. Because if you are going to do something wrong, it is very necessary to understand at the same time. So you have to understand you are going in a wrong direction, and at the same time you can take right steps. So customer development process is about customer discovery, customer validation, customer creation, and your company building. So once you have developed some product, must be this product must be market fit. And you should have MVP, minimum viable product, in order to validate your idea. Once your MVP is accepted by the customer, you can now develop the original version of that product, which can be launched into the market. Next. There are known knowns. These are things we know that we know. There are known unknowns, that is to say, there are things that we know we don't know, but there are also unknown unknowns. There are things that we don't know. Statement by Donald Rumsfeld. Next. So it is about traditional product development where there is a known problem and known solution. So you have requirements, you can design the solution, you can go for implementation, verification, and then maintenance. Next. Next slide, please. Product development at typical startup assumes customers and markets are understood. So here in this case, you have a known problem. You are the product owner. You want agility in your system. You have to speed up, but you have unknown solution. Next. So more chances of failure are there. Product development at lean startup. So lean startup is about your customer discovery, customer validation, customer creation, and company building, where you are going to validate your hypothesis and turning your hypothesis into facts. So with unknown problem, you are going to have unknown solution. You have to gather the feedback from your customers. You have to discover their insights. And based on that, you have to iterate on your product and services. Next. So a lot of uncertainty is there, but you have to reduce the waste. You have to minimize the time of the cycle. That is the lean startup approach. Next. So it is about lean startup means you have unknown problem, and for unknown problem, you still have unknown solution. So a lot of uncertainty is there. Next. Startups search for assumptions about the unknown. Existing companies execute what they know. Next. Next, please. You build something your customer really wants. So you please understand the customer needs and wants, and based on that, develop your innovative product. Next. The why before the what. Most startups don't fail because they can't build a great product, but because no one wanted the product. So that's why the startup is said to be failed, because your product which you have developed is not acceptable in the market, even if you have added many features in it, but maybe you did not conduct any market survey and all that before you start your business. Next. So what is the foundation of lean startup? Please press one by one. Foundation of lean startup. Please press the enter key. So it is about your building something. You are going to build your product. You are going to have measurements, collecting data. From the collected data, you have to learn, you have to make changes. So please try to reduce the time through this lean startup cycle. So there are three important things: building, measurement, learning. Next. You have to speed up your process. You have to validate your assumptions. So validated learning is often used as an excuse for a failure of execution or after the fact rationalization. To draw a very clear distinction, lean startup uses the word validated. Validated learning is the process of demonstrating empirically that a team has discovered valuable truths about a startup's present and future business prospects. Next. So you see here the traditional startup versus lean startup approach. So below is lean startup, where you are gradually going from cupcake to bigger cake and then wedding cake. And here you are going to make use of this cycle of build, measure, learn cycle. And it is very different from traditional approach of sequential approach. Next. So lean startup life cycle: to steer a startup, minimize the total time throughout the feedback loop. Enter the build phase with an MVP in your mind. Evaluate progress using innovation accounting. Next. Next slide, please. So again, I have told you the cycle. Innovation accounting: establish real data on where the company is right now. It applies to the measure and learn phases in the loop. After the startup has made all the changes and product optimization has been performed, it can now move to its baseline toward the ideal. The company reaches a decision mind? Was the hypothesis correct? What change is necessary to the current strategies? Next. Next slide. So lean startup life cycle is about your generation of your innovative ideas. Once you have innovative ideas, you have to be ready with your MVP. You have to perform the measurements. You have to gather the data. From the collected data, you have to learn so many things. And based on that, you have to make modifications. Next. So we need to test hypothesis. Next. So lean startup, if compared with Deming's wheel, you can see here, there are 4 circles in Deming wheel. And the time taken in going throughout this loop is much larger than the time required in lean startup cycle, where there are just 3 circles: build, measure, learn. But Deming's wheel is having planning, doing, checking, acting. So more time is consumed in going through this feedback loop, and lean approach has to do something. It has to speed up the process by reducing this time throughout the feedback loop. Next. Next, please. Next slide.
Sir, it is minimum viable product, sir.
Version of product that enables a full form of build, measure, learn with a minimum amount of the effort and least amount of the development time. As core features which allow the product to be deployed, helps in avoiding building a product that the customers do not really want, can be deployed to early adopters who might have some interest in your product because of value proposition or the value which you have added to your product. Next. So you have to be ready with your MVP when you are going for build phase. Version of product that enables. Next slide, please. This I have already read. Next. Dr. Lal, next slide, please. Next slide.
Sir,
slide
please wait, sir. Wait, sir. The slide is not moving. Please.
Okay. MVP is about the quality principle. If we do not know who the customer is, we really don't know what the quality is. Try not to presuppose what attribute of the product will the customer consider as worthwhile. Learn what the customers care about. Remove any feature, process, or effort that does not contribute directly to the learning that you are asking. Next. Remove, go back. Yes, MVP, the problems in building, legal issues are there, fear of competition is there, risk is there of branding and marketing, and fear of failure. Next. So a lot of issues are involved when developing your MVP. When it is just minimum, it means there are no more features in your products. When you're combining minimum with viable, then certainly the product you want to build. When minimum viable, are going to overlap, is a minimum plus viable, is the product with good features which you can develop. Rest is the waste which you have to minimize. Next. Minimum viable product. So here in the picture you can see the first one is minimum. Nobody wants to use this type of thing. Then when minimum plus viable, good enough product to attract the first users. And when viable is maximum, viability is maximum, now you are ready to develop your product. So try to have minimum plus viable with maximum viability. Next. So here you can see the concept. The upper one, nobody likes it. See yourself. And below one is using lean startup approach. See here, you gradually moving from bicycle, motorcycle to the car. And this is the right minimum viable product for the validation learning. Next. A technique to start the learning process as quickly as possible. The fastest way to get through the loop with minimum amount of efforts. Unlike a prototype or concept testing, an MVP is designed not just to answer product design or technical questions. Its goal is to test fundamental business hypotheses. Any additional work beyond what was required to start learning is the waste. Next. So what is MVP is equal to shitty product. The minimum viable product is that version of a new product which allows a team to collect the maximum amount of validated learning about your customers with least efforts, by Eric Ries. Next. So if you look at this MVP development process, the maturity over the time, most of the time is wasted in trial and error method. After some time, you can reach the saturation point where you get proof of concept, and after taking more trial and error time, you are having a maturity and stability in your system. So in your MVP development process. Next. The MVP development is about, a prototype development, low risk investments, short development time. Next. MVP is designed to change the world, supposed to solve a real problems, built to learn user feedback, more minimal than you think. MVP is not about getting profit, designed to impress users, supposed to be an end product carved in stone. Next. So myth number one about lean startup. Lean startups try to spend as little money as possible. That's totally wrong. The truth is, lean startup method is not about the costing, it is about the speed. Next. Now, myth number two, the lean startup is only for software companies. No, we do have lean manufacturing, lean software development, lean hardware. Almost all companies are going to make use of lean startup approach where level of uncertainty is very high. Next. Next. Lean startup is not cheap startup, actually a fast startup. Shortcut startup, a guarantee for success. Next. Is not there. Failing fast, spending less money, fail cheap, but put a process methodology around it to perform validated learning. Next. Get ready to fail. 90% of startups in India fail. 80% of new products fail. 3/4 of startups fail. 70% of all new product launches fail in the first year itself. Next. You really hit the bullseye, but this never stopped you from playing. That's true. Next. Design an experiment that attempts to answer the question. By Eric Ries. Create series of fast and cheap micro experiments that lead you to validated learning. Next. Validated learning, the unit of progress for lean startups. Next. Next. So if comparing Agile Manifesto versus lean startups, Agile Manifesto, where we value working software over documentation. Whereas in lean startups, we value learning, which is a unit of progress for your startup. So what are lean startup principles? Please press enter key. Dr. Lal, please press enter key continuously. Lean startup principles is about to eliminate waste. Next. Creating knowledge. Next. Short iterations. Next. Fail fast. Lean startup is about development of MVP, where you have to perform the validated learning, certain improvements in your product or service which you want to offer. Next. It is not visible. Please, next slide, please. So move as fast as possible. Learn as much as possible. Next. Don't be afraid to pivot. Next. Don't be afraid to fail. Do have validated learning. Lean startup method is equal to customer development plus agile development, and to make use of build, measure, learn cycle. Next. Life is too short to build something nobody wants. Next. So what is the difference between minimum marketable features and MVP? The smallest unit of functionality with intrinsic marketable value. But MVP, the minimum viable product, is that version of new product which allows a team to collect the maximum amount of validated learning about customers with least efforts. Next. Next, please. Thank you very much, Dr. Lal. That's all from my side. Over to you.
Thank you so much, sir, for giving your precious important session, sir. Definitely, it was very informative, insightful presentation, sir. Definitely, students have learned lots of things, lots of uh, issues which is created for design lean startups and for minimum viable products. Once again, I would like to share my thanks, vote of thanks on behalf of IES College of Technology, Bhopal, for giving your precious session, sir. Thank you so much, sir. Thanks a lot, sir.
Thank you, Dr. Lal, for giving me an opportunity to express my views, and I'm thankful to the management of IES University, Bhopal, and to all the council members, IIC president, convener, vice president. Thank you very much once again. And I need your permission. Shall I leave now?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. Please. Thank you so much, sir.
Thank you very much, Dr. Lal. Thank you very much.